phone.
Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. Today we're going to look at the emerging security architecture in East Asia. और इस के बारे में बात करने के लिए मेरे साथ हैं ब्रिगेडियर अरुण सहगल. First, let me welcome him and then I'll set the context. Sir, good evening and welcome back to Gunner Shot, sir. We are meeting now after a very long time and it's a pleasure to have you back here. And we're going to talk of a very interesting subject which we have discussed, the security architecture in East Asia. When I say East Asia, I'm talking of a large swathe of territory, a complete, you could call it East Asia, you could call it the Western Pacific, right? And the elephant in this ocean is obviously China. Why are we talking about this? I mean, everyone should understand. हम इसके बारे में क्यों बात कर रहे हैं? हम इसीलिए बात कर रहे हैं कि आज के दिन आप देखो चाइना और ताइवान का रोज कुछ न कुछ प्रॉब्लम होता है, राइट? मिलिट्री प्रॉब्लम होता है, ऑफ कोर्स पॉलिटिकल प्रॉब्लम तो है ही, बट रोज देयर सम एयरक्राफ्ट वायलेशन, सम मिलिट्री एक्सरसाइज, और ये बढ़ता जा रहा है. एवरी डे आई सी समथिंग और other happening in Philippines. राइट, सबाइना शोल एंड सेकंड थॉमस शोल के इर्द गिर्द रोज मुक्का मुक्की हो रहा है, कुछ न कुछ हो रहा है, कुछ it's a whole lot of hybrid gray zone warfare going on in that area. और तो और Vietnam has also started claiming islands and they have started dredging and building islands. In fact, I saw a report where they have said what they have done in the past 4 years, they have done in the past 1 year, they've speeded up. ऊपर China is making a lot of military movements around the Senkaku Islands. So Japan is also, come into the fray. And then USA is always there. Today I read a report, just today, that USA is going to have some basing facilities on the northern tip of Philippines Island, one of the islands, which is overlook the Luzon and the Bashi Straits. Yeah. Which actually forecloses, if that is the case, almost forecloses, Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Because any invasion of Taiwan, to just put it on record, needs a logistics base, and that logistics base, if those of you who know military affairs, has to be developed from the south only. Right, American presence there stops it. So every day, and because of China's militarization, all the countries, right from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, we'll have a look at the map so that you're in focus. South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, they're all militarizing. What's more, this Siem Reap base, the Ream base of Cambodia, is now ready and where Chinese are operating, and Chinese are making a canal along through Cambodia to reach that. So there are a lot of military developments happening in this area. To offset this, all countries are arming themselves, and they're all getting into new, bilaterals and trilaterals and security cooperation things and all that. So there's a new network emerging in East Asia. We need to understand what this network is all about. We also need to understand where we stand in this network. How do we handle this network? Remember, one overarching network in this architecture is the Quad. So where does Quad fit in? Where does India fit in? So all these questions are vexing questions. Our elections are over. But the outflow of that election is China is cutty more with India than it was before the elections, which means we need to take more interest in this part of the world, right? So for all this, I request Brigadier Arun Sahgal, sir, the floor is yours. Please take on, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much, General Shankar sir. It is always a pleasure to be on your channel and discuss issues of what are called great strategic concern, but which are somehow not given the kind of predominance that it requires. I will cover my remarks under four headings. My first, I will just take a cursory look at the emerging global order, which I call a period of contestation. I will then just quickly deliberate on the contours of confrontation. In the third part, I will look at the Chinese and US attempts at creating a security architecture in support of their own interests. And I will finish by highlighting certain imperatives of India's security dynamics, particularly in the IOR. So this is how I will cover my remarks. First fundamental point we need to understand is that we are entering a period of unprecedented strategic competition. This strategic competition is now marked by the attempts by the United States to maintain this unipolarity in the global order and continue to be the prima donna in the international geopolitical and economic system. And that is being contested by China, supported by Russia, which is attempting to contest this US primacy and bring in a change in the existing economic, political, and even a technological order based on their concept of what they call uh, area period of common destiny of mankind, and supported by initiatives like global security initiative, global development initiative, of which the BRI is part, and also try to create in particularly in among the global south and in east in Asia the construct of global civilizational initiative. So the whole idea is that there are two now different streams of global system which are now emerging, and this is something which these axes uh, are important to understand because they are the ones that is where the contestation is going to come about. The As far as the eastern axis is concerned, is apart from the fact that there is a war going on in Ukraine, the important thing to understand is that there is a more coming out strategy by the Chinese in support of the Russian efforts, both in economic as well as military terms, not so much in giving them arms, but giving them a support system and backup in terms of accessories and critical items which support the Russian military capabilities. Added to that is this whole issue of their attempts to create some, which General Shankar and his some of his talks have already highlighted, what I call a crink. The crink is China, Russia, Iran, North Korea axis, which is so the what we are looking at now is, and third, of course, is the Gaza area, Gaza contest which is going on, and here again it's a very fascinating context that while the Israelis are battering the daylight out of the poor Palestinians and the Hamas and the poor people in Gaza, there is not a squeak in the international system against this. People just make very small, weak remarks which mean nothing, and above all, the Arab world itself is disparate about this whole issue. They are not united. So the question basically is this: is that in the geopolitical context, that at one level the United States is now involved in three contests: Ukraine, Gaza, and in Indo-Pacific. The the only people who are trying to contest this is the new bloc of what I call the Eastern Bloc of China, Russia. and or what we call roughly crink, and their supporting supporters. So this is how the ball game is being played. Uh, the important thing here to understand is that despite the fact the Gaza is an ongoing conflict, the Ukraine is an ongoing conflict. The important thing of the Indo-Pacific is it is the direct United States involvement in this conflict. In other two conflicts, the United States has a proxy involvement. The Ukraine war is being fought through weapon systems, intelligence, and other support, including now F-16s to Ukraine. The front ending is done by Ukrainians. In Gaza, front ending is done by Israelis by supporting it. But here, there is no front ending. It's a direct contest between China led, uh, China supported powers, including North Korea, Russia, and the United States and its allies and strategic partners. So, this is the narrative that we need to understand. So, when we come to the dynamics at play in Southeast Asia and East Asia, I like to highlight an interesting facet. I mean, the interesting facet of Asia is this: Asia has three important powers or important players on whom the geopolitics and geostrategic construct of the region rests. In the north is China, which is essentially continental, and it is now trying to emerge as a maritime and a rimland power, trying to ensure that its immediate maritime spaces are dominated and build up capacities and capabilities to go beyond the first island chain and the second island chain. The other side of the this thing is that it is trying to incubate South China Sea as a part of a Chinese lake to ensure that it's the Chinese Han China's mainland, which is the industrial belt of China, is given a adequate strategic depth, as also to ensure that it controls the strategic waterways through whom nearly 60% of the trade in this region passes. The second element of this triangle is the U.S. allies and the U.S. and its allies, particularly in East Asia and Western Pacific. They are collaborating together. We'll talk about how in a while to ensure that the China remains constrained. And the third element of this whole triangle is India, which is the Western bookend, dominating a major player. I won't say dominating, as a major player in the Indian Ocean region, which is trying to ensure that the strategic balance in the region is not upended by Chinese provocations and Chinese actions. So here in this triangle, US and I and India have a joint interest, a collaborative interest to ensure that I will not use the word contain China, but constrain China. And constrainment is essentially a function of making the other party believe that it has to follow rules of law and has to be restrained in its actions and not bully others and weaker players. So this is how the game is being played. So now I'll come to the dynamics at play in East Asia and Southeast Asia, and then before I come to that, should you have any questions on this part, I will. If,
I'm so I'm okay with what you said, but I think apart from this thing, I think there is a contestation for the supremacy, which is actually a subplay of the Islamic world, where you see powers like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, you know, playing out. Though the Arab world is quiet about the Israel-Gaza war, they're not able to do something. But this is a contestation which goes on. This is important because in the long run, energy. is going to matter. And once energy matters, which way this part of the globe swings also will, matter. To some extent, I think this needs a little mentions.
I couldn't agree with you more on this issue. The Islamic factor is very important. Let me cover this part of this when I come to the third part, India and the IOR. But okay, now I come. As far as the Southeast Asia and East Asia are concerned, let me start by highlighting some aspects of the Chinese thinking. What the Chinese are up to? The Chinese big concern is that it has a concert of major global powers acting in unison on its east, and for them the fulcrum of that contestation is Taiwan. It is also trying to, through its actions in Philippines and other places, is trying to stop, like you rightly said in your opening remarks, the power projection of the Chinese beyond the Bashai and Luzo channels. Now, the important facet for the Chinese, therefore, is this, that it can be a big power, it can be a big player, it can have the largest navy in the world, but where do it go? How does it project power? So, so the important thing from the Chinese perspective is this, that China believes that unless I make a breakthrough today, tomorrow, or day after, Chinese intentions or Chinese great national perception of being a global power will always remain constrained in Asia. It will be checkmated by the Western construct of the US allied system over here. So when you look at the region from the Chinese perspective, the Chinese are very clear that something has to give, and something that has to give is that we would have ultimately have a conflictual scenario. Is the time now? Clearly, in my perception, no. Is the time tomorrow? Maybe. But is the time down the line, another 15, 20 years? It will all depends on how China uses its power and influence. And here, the Chinese power and influence is not only military power and influence, but it is also technological and its economic power. So the break could come under various circumstances. Scenario one, which I look at which is being played out right now, is posturing, contestation, and continuously pushing the agenda through gray zone operations to ensure that there is strategic instability in the region. And as the Shangri-La dialogue brought out, the regional players, and this is important, sir, the regional players who are economically intertwined with China have the difficulties of choice in terms of becoming a credible contested partner with the Western alliance system or the American alliance system. Yesterday, or 2 days back, in a discourse, a very important Chinese, a Japanese analyst said, he said, you have to understand this. We have to be sure of, in any escalation, that America would act in concert with our interests. And so the bottom line which is asking is United States going to go to war in support of Japan, Korea, or Philippines? Yes or no? Will it escalate into a hot conflict? No. Now here lies the dilemma, and here lies the some kind of a card which the Chinese play. Chinese are trying, they are contesting United States power and influence through military and other technological means, but they are also putting pressure on these middle powers in the region and telling them the consequences of their action, and A, B, that the United States is not a reliable partner. So this is how the Chinese are playing the game, and in this we see the actions that are taken by the what is it called, the famous sword exercise which they took recently in against Taiwan, and actions
Joint
they are taking,
swords.
joint sword exercise, and the action that they're taking against Philippines are part and parcel of coercive tactics, and this coercion will continue. And the coercion is also a psychological game being played. This is something which we tend to overlook. Psychological war, as you are rightly written so much about, is a part and parcel of the Chinese construct. So this is where the whole issue lies. From the Chinese perspective, this is the game of 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 great psychological game which is being played to to clearly create in the minds of the smaller powers, not so much the United States, that ability of the United States to come to their assistance. Same thing happened. We were discussing the Senkaku Island where the Chinese four ships landed up over there the other day. The whole idea was this: Japanese are not sure whether if there is an escalation or this gets into hot war, the Americans will support them. They might say so. They might do it. Okay, so this is as far as the Chinese perspective goes. Broadly, I'm talking about. The second issue, sir, is the issue of the new collective security architecture which the Americans are trying. Americans are aware of this. Americans are aware of this. So what they are trying to do is that they are trying to create a number of multilaterals, trilaterals, bilaterals, having various kinds of various levels of meetings. There's a summit in Washington between Korea and Philippines. There's a summit between Australia, Japan, and United States. There was also a meeting in Honolulu where Austin held a meeting with all the other four players in the region. The whole idea is of this whole initiative is to consolidate both collective security and enhance and upend the military capabilities. That's the bottom line. So what are they trying to do? At the interesting part was in the 40-minute meeting which took place with the Philippine defense minister, and from where this whole concept of so-called squad came about. The whole idea basically is this: is that, like you also rightly said, that Americans will upgrade their deployments in the region. They have deployed what is called a Triumph system, or a Triumph in the Northern Islands. There are three islands over there, the Northern Islands. The whole idea is to create an adequate deployment which ensures that it becomes a credible deterrence to the Chinese incursions or the Chinese coercion tactics. If that's the only game over here. The second element is, which you have widely discussed and we have discussed in the past, is the Bosha and the Luzon Channel are the main entry points into the South China Sea. Now, the Americans want to ensure that these entry points are never ever uh, are close to the Chinese, to the American shipping. The American flotilla essentially takes about 4 to 5 days to move from Guam into this region. So if they don't have deployments, credible deployments, they need that much of time, and so they want to ensure to forward deployments and forward systems in place to ensure that the Chinese cannot upstage them in this region. The 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 second element of this whole thing is that they are now entering into a multi-domain cooperative systems. Of one is the intelligence, coordinated air defense, okay, and joint patrolling, joint exercises, etc., etc. The Americans have done close to about over 300 exercises. There is a report of the IISS recent meeting where they have highlighted the number of exercises the Americans have done with just about everybody. The idea of these exercises is threefold. One is interoperability, give assurance to the partners that the Americans are over there, and to showcase to the other side, to the Chinese, that they will be present over there. There are a number of exercises which are being planned in Australia this year. There is also this whole issue of what is called the uh, wait a minute. Joint a rapid reciprocal access agreement which have been signed, reciprocal access agreement which have been signed between the Japanese and the Australians, which basically means that the F-35s from one country can be deployed over there to the other country. So the idea basically is this, that the entire security architecture is not only being upgraded, but it is also getting integrated. Added to that is that since the INF treaty is no longer is in existence, the Americans are also making plans to deploy, possibly should the push come to shove, some intermediate nuclear forces or nuclear systems, which is part of the of extended deterrence, both for Japan and Korea. They are in addition to going back to the small islands which they jumped during the Second World War, in their battle for Guam and the battle for coming close to Japan. Those islands are being resurrected by airfields, etc., with maritime deployments, to basically to ensure that there is adequate forces are available. Now the question comes is it adequate? This is something which we as analysts need to understand, to discern. I not understand, to discern. Essentially speaking, the Chinese have got anti-access area denial strategy basically to deal with these items, to these deployments. Will they be able to do it? Answer is yes and no. Number of war games, number of simulation exercises are held, which basically means there will be a large scale damage to both sides. But the ability to able to constrain one or the other will remain a question mark. What happens is, if there is a hot war that starts between China and United States and its allies, will it, and as a consequence of that war, the mainland China is hit. Now, if the mainland China is hit by American forces or American elements, then the issue becomes larger, because then United States is not at war or not fighting a defensive and a battle of ensuring dominance of its area of influence, but then America is now fighting a war of a conflict, direct conflict with the Chinese. Now, how will that play out is something which is a, and my impression is at this point in time, both China and United States are clearly aware that this is too serious a business to get involved. But there's a joker in the pack. The joker in the pack is North Korea and other who can upset the entire apple cart by a rash and a stupid action, like hitting the Japanese, or hitting the South Koreans. In any case, he has already is upended the treaty with South Korea. So this is what the scenario is that is playing out in this region. Uh, I'll stop here. If you have any comments or any issues, I will try and answer
So,
them or give a clarification.
right. So let's consider a scenario.
Okay.
I mean, actually, there are two scenarios which you have broadly outlined, which will continue in East Asia and the Western Pacific. The first scenario is you'll see a series of gray zone actions interminably around Philippines, Scarborough Shoal, Thomas Shoal, all that. Then, of course, there'll be some growling around Taiwan and
Hmm.
Japan,
Hmm.
and North Korea doing something, in the north against South Korea. But all these, so far, for the past 3 years, have not led to even a bullet being fired.
Exactly.
The moment a bullet is fired anywhere, these things will start escalating.
Hmm.
Whether we like it or not, the first thing which I would like you to probably analyze is China in a position to go in for a war. I mean, in the sense that willy nilly, can China handle, I mean, assuming that something will happen. The moment something happens, escalation, how it goes, and USA is probably sucked into the whole system. Will China risk, or can China handle? Will it risk, or can it handle a simultaneous confrontation with, say, 3, 4 nations backed by USA? Because a whole lot of it depends on China's acceptance of that risk, or China's willingness to go to that war, and China's capability to go for that, for that contact. Uh, we need to look at that. Because why I'm saying this is why we
I'll
need to
answer that,
debate
sir.
it was
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. I'll answer that, sir. Answer.
why
And it's
why is why is this? It's a very fundamental thing. Is that we expect China to go to war, but will it go to war is the million-dollar question.
true. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So okay. So the short answer is, as we have seen on our own borders for the last nearly 4.5 years now, 4 years plus, is the fact is that the Chinese are maintaining a status quo ante posture, but yet is, despite building up all kinds of resources being built up, J20 is being deployed, forward area is done, there is a degree of restraint and discretion. The same degree of restraint and discretion exists in the East. The rationale for it is very simple. The rationale is that until and unless the war escalates into the nuclear domain, in the in the conventional domain, if there is a conflict and Chinese uh, are unable to get any of the victory or get only a partial victory, and the Chinese homeland is attacked by conventional United States forces or allied forces, how will the Chinese operate? How will it impact the leadership's perspective? Then the next element of that comes in, and as part of an escalation strategy is that the Chinese will start looking at nuclear asset, or starting doing a brinkmanship of the nuclear asset. So in all probability, after a small or a limited exchange of fire between the two sides, which includes Taiwan, which includes Philippines, and also the mainland China, as well as the American territories, which will be attacked, as well as Japan, etc., etc. There may be an attempt to bring about a ceasefire. Now, the question with the Chinese face is, like I said in the beginning, for China to emerge as a global power, it has to get out of Asian containment. That Asian containment is something which is trying to restrain Chinese emergence as a great power. Its BRI and other elements are not working that well. Its strategic influence are limited. It just did 11 exercises last year with SCOs and other places. There are no other players who does any exercise. Its leverages globally are there in terms of cash and carry strategy, but they are not there in terms of any hardcore interest based alliance system or interest based partnerships. They are not there. So the question for the Chinese is basically is this: is their posturing, high ending the posturing, great degree of brinkmanship is the only answer to keep the other person tied up, and therefore and they are being greatly supported by the discourse in the West, which is talking about two things: the futility of a war with China, futility of conflict with China, and also they are talking about is futility of economic and technological war with China. These are part and parcel of, like you very rightly say, as a part and parcel of influence operations being launched by the Chinese using virtual means to ensure that. To that extent, sir, Chinese are kosher at this point in time. They don't. They have no intention. in the for the next 10 years to attack Taiwan or anything, capture any territory by force. As long as they can browbeat, they can deploy, they can posture, they can sell their credibly sell their military power, and which like we as uh, particularly I call myself a one of people who get self deterred by the Chinese power and influence. They are happy. They don't have to do anything. So in the scenario, what we are talking about is that it will not be a large scale conflict. Even if the conflict breaks out, it will be a limited conflict, and which will not escalate into a nuclear dimension. That's my analysis, sir.
That's fine, sir. That's a fair one. I mean, I also agree because if you see the way they went about what they did with us in Eastern Ladakh, Doklam, after all, all of us tend to see the Chinese friction points uh, separately. But when you look at it from the entirety of what happened in Doklam, what happened in 2020 in Eastern Ladakh, where they tried something big and failed, and what happened later in Yangtze, which I thought was the tip of a arrow, which got blunted. If you see these three issues in their larger spectrums, certain limitations of China come in, notwithstanding all their thing. And uh, right, so with that kind of a thing, if you look at what's happening in the Philippines, after all, say 2 years back, 1 year back, the Philippines problem wasn't so high, right? Now, if you look at the from, I mean, I'm looking at it from the Chinese point of view. They always were focusing on Taiwan. Now, all of a sudden, they have to start doing something with Philippines. And mind you, if you've been following what's happening in Philippines, they're not coming well off. They're not
Yes, yes,
able to handle. They're not able to handle Philippines.
yeah,
And my
yeah,
personal thing is that I think all of us who have problems with China need to study what's happening in Philippines, the way Philippines is handling it. It's handling it through, it's a multi-domain operation, and Philippines is doing its own trick. And the fact that, 3 years back or 2 years back, there was no talk of China and Japan ever having a military, even a stare at each other. But today it's more. Why
can
I'm
I?
saying is,
Sorry,
yes,
go
sir.
on.
What the last thing?
No, no. So no, no.
The la-
आप बोलिए. Sorry, I apologize for
no, no,
interrupting.
no, sir. No, the last line, in fact, is that I think China is a bit overstretched.
So
Yeah,
okay, okay. So Philippines is a very interesting example. During your opening remarks, we talked about Quad. Now, Philippines is an interesting example where all four Quad partners have come together to
to
arm
help him.
Philippines, to
Yes,
provide military arms to Philippines. Now, this is a great example of how four Quad partners who are not in any security architecture but can support an important player who is on the cusp of being coerced by a stronger player. They can come together to support it. We are providing them with BrahMos missile system, tactical missile system, which are very important for the Philippines. The security system being provided, and the dual use system being provided by the Japanese. The Australians are providing them with equipment and resources and radars, and of course, Americans are deploying their forward assets, including Tomahawks and things like that. So this is a classic example of Quad's efficacy, if there is any. And this is not lost to the Chinese. This is not lost to the Chinese. And now when we are looking at the Vietnamese issue, which you also talked about, if you're looking at the Vietnamese issue, the same architecture can happen.
yes.
India, we are already providing submarines. We have already got resources there. We have got $100 million line of credit on defense, etc., etc.
And we've
As
given them petrol boats also.
And patrol boats, we can give them tomorrow somebody, we can do anything, and we have a reason for going there in support of our assets in the Tonkin Gulf, our economic assets in the Tonkin Gulf, etc. The Americans are there. The Japs are having a very good relationship with them. I have no idea about the Australian Vietnamese relationship. I presume it's equally good. So so what is this thing? A new and interesting uh, dimension is emerging where Quad, although not being Quad, is
Is
supporting
working.
a critical element of a country. Now, see, and there is one more issue that we need to look at, and that brings me to the East Asia focus. The issue that we need to look at is that this domination and control over the outlets out of South China Sea is further constricting the Chinese strategic space. Although they are building up new islands, they are building up new uh, force structures on those islands. They are deploying missiles. They're doing H-6 bomber. They can do anything that they want. But the fact of the matter is this: that on the western flank, as the time goes, India will become a strong player, and India will also start moving into the direction of procuring the outlets from the South China Sea into the Indian Ocean region as a part of his rightful security requirement. So we will look at Sunda, we'll look at Lombok. Lombok, we expect the Australians to do something. Sunda, we is an area that we can also look at, the Australians can look at. But certainly the Bay of Bengal, Malacca Strait, and across on the other side of the Malacca would become an area of influence. Now, please look at the architecture now. One hand, India's area of influence is increasing as China tries to increase its footprints in the Indian Ocean region. On the other hand, the outlet is controlled by the American-led alliance system, and eh, so the great two ocean strategy of the Chinese is under great degree of stress. Now, this is something we need to work on. It's not going to happen just like that. It's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
which to work on. This is the architecture I was talking about when we're talking about the Indian Ocean region. Therefore, credibility of ensuring criticality of Bay of Bengal, that means south from starting from Hambantota, going right up to Myanmar, going right up to Bangladesh. This area cannot be allowed to be controlled by anybody else other than us and our strategic partners. So, therefore, this is where we need to be focused upon in our terms of our area domination by our maritime assets. On the other hand, Gwadar is coming into a big focus. We are aware of the fact that the Shiraz Sharif was told in no uncertain terms that the Chinese want to develop this as an important base, that they will. And there is now a new element which we are listening to is the first overseas Chinese command, which is going to come up in Djibouti with a major base in this place in Gwadar, and some elements of that being also integrated with along with the Russians, with the Iranians. Now the Russian angle in this whole game is becoming very interesting. Now, with the opening of the rail route from the Caspian Sea right up to Bandar Abbas, and which is now becoming an Eastern East Eurasia trade route uh, as part of the INSTC, India North International North South Trading Corridor. So there are large number of these elements that are in play, but the important point is that we have to understand from our perspective of dealing with the Chinese challenge is that a squeeze from the South China Sea, from the west, and squeeze from the east, and constraining Chinese ability to deploy a so-called large-scale carrier battle groups out in the open is something which will need to be closely looked into by the military planners who want peace and stability, i.e., the quadrilateral. So this is something which I wanted to highlight. All yours, sir.
Oh, fine, sir. I think we've covered a whole lot of things and what uh, the East Asia security architecture would look like and what it should look like and where India fits, right? Which you so nicely put that as India rises and its area of influence, the sphere of influence increases, we're going to overlap the ambitions of China, and those will be our friction points. And right, and it's no more just the LAC. The LAC is just one part, and my view is that fine, China can deploy what it wants that side, and the infrastructure is better the other side. There's no doubt about it. But over the past 3 4 years, we have improved our infrastructure.
Absolutely.
As our
Absolutely.
infrastructure keeps improving, the ability of China to do anything funny here is actually decreasing.
Yes.
Right? In fact, on the other hand, uh, they have to start looking at defending themselves at some point of time, which hitherto they have not done. So actually, the my view is the LAC is going to flip in the way things are operating in a matter of 2 to 3 years. But what's not going to flip is the expansion and the contestation in the seas,
Yes.
right? And
So
and that's going to happen, and that's where the whole story is, and that's where probably our focus has to be. And I think I'll leave it at that, unless you have anything to add, and I'll
yes,
take
sir.
some
Thank
questions.
you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my two penny bit.
No, no. So I thought you made some fantastic points today, giving an overview of how things develop. Because most of the time, otherwise, we're only looking at the LAC, or you're looking at some incident which has happened in JNK, or we are so besotted with our own elections that we
Mhm.
start losing the larger picture. And now that the elections are over, we need to get back to start looking at the larger picture outside, because a lot of dynamics are
Uh,
happening which we need to focus on.
I if, in future, if I can make a small point, in future,
So
whenever you have the time, thing, I would like to share with you some thoughts of uh, strategic stability vis-a-vis Pakistan, because I just come back from a big discussion with the Pakistanis on this, and I'll share some thoughts so that just
yeah,
to put a perspective in place and how they are thinking, because what when we meet these guys, they are not has been, they are we also get from them the current people who are
running the
deciding
shows.
the strategy. So if
You
anytime you
tell
have
me
the
the date. No, no, you tell me the date and we'll fix it.
okay, when I come back from
Say,
the US, I'm going to the US on the 17th, so after that I'll come and
yeah, when you come back, sir, around 24th, 25th, whenever you come back, we'll
okay.
have it. We'll do it.
Thank you, thank you, thank
We'll
you.
take some questions on.
Sure, sure.
The first, Anubhav Khaneja has become a YouTube member. Thank you. Thanks for joining Ghana Shot. So I'll take a few questions, sir, right from the top. And yeah, Srinivas says, salute, Brigadier Arun Sahgal. Thanks a lot. It's a great thing whenever he comes in. Okay. Now, the present day condition of all the allies of USA with regard to their economy and military strength is a clear testimony that USA itself seeks slaves and not allies, your views. Because he's saying that, look, that alliance is not stable.
uh, to a large degree you have a point there. The issue is look, okay, you've got to see the power equations. As far as United States is concerned, it's an offshore power. It has got no stakes. Its stakes are as much as is deployed in the forward areas. That's it. All the other players, particularly in East Asia and even in Europe, if you look at them, are are located in the region, and the consequences of their actions are directly dependent on them. So to that extent, the Americans uh, alliance system as it exists today, in relation to a strong challenge being mounted by China and Russia, there is a degree of concern amongst the allies. Allies are not very comfortable. They are not even comfortable. Like I tried to explain in my talk, is that whether America will actually come to their aid and to what degree, because any America direct involvement will mean that America is at war or America is in direct conflict with it. So, if you want to see what is happening in Europe, is a classic example which outlines your concerns. I totally agree with you. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely correct. But yet, they are not slaves. But the question is, they are tied to the apron strings for their own security. Who is going to secure Japan from China? Who's going to secure Senkaku Islands? Who's going to secure Korea from South Korea from North Korea? In fact, if you notice, as far as South Koreans are concerned, Americans are less of a security partner, but the Chinese are bigger because the Chinese have a handle to control North Korea and constrain North Korea. And that is because the Koreans and the Chinese have a huge trade and their dependencies, etc. So it's a very convoluted sort of a world. But your point is right. I mean, it is impossible for the United States to exercise direct influence without his allies. And yet, the allies have only that much of a power and influence because of their size, because of their location, and because of their own concerns, which are also related to economic concerns.
So we've always been taught that Chinese want to win without fighting. But his daily acts in the South China Sea are antithetical to this philosophy. How long can he push before he's pulled into a hot war?
All I will say is change your teaching here. Chinese want to win without fighting. There is no such thing. That used to be an old proverb when the world was weak and the Chinese were dominating the entire region. It's no longer the case. Uh, your entire problem with the Chinese, India's problem with the Chinese is one simple facet that India has started to stand up to China. That's the problem. The strategy of winning without fighting is no longer there. And we have to, as Indians, change our mind. And similarly, the other place. Why are 300 odd exercises being held by the Americans? The whole idea is to pressurize the Chinese, and thinking is that, hey guys, we are putting together a colossal security architecture. You dare not get funny. There are limits to it. So, what in fact is happening today is that it is the collaboration and close partnerships between the allies and the partners in Asia, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, which is putting the pressure on it, and they are trying to win wars without fighting the Chinese.
Okay. He says, is there a no need for international rules of war like during Mahabharat? No war after sunset, no use of Divyastras, etc. It's improbable, but
Yeah, please understand, sir, this is a cursed world. There are no such things are going to be accepted. And look at what is happening. My heart goes out to save four hostages. How many poor Palestinians have died here? Just imagine that. Yeah. I mean, just look at the irony of the whole thing. This is a very unjust world, and there are no qualms about brutality. So I'm sorry, this is not going to happen. I mean, you're a good philosophical person, sir. I respect you, but the reality of life is this: is there are no giveaways and no freebies.
okay. China is taking land and sea on all fronts, while India can't even handle Pakistan or small countries like Nepal or Mauritius. Does this speak how good China is or how bad Indian institutions are?
Look, I don't know what's the notion of this question. We can handle China, Pakistan. Yeah? Pakistan is no problem with us. We haven't had a war with Pakistan. Low bit of terrorism can continue, like they blame us for whatever is happening inside their country. I mean, if you talk to the Pakistani, which I do twice a year for 6 7 long days together, I know what their mindset is. Nepal Nepal is a landlocked country which will play the game which is being played. It is being played, but please do not overread what you read in the press. Nepalese have a limit. Nepalese Prime Minister is sitting in Delhi today to
Vote taking ceremonies.
the Prime Minister's oath taking ceremony. He doesn't go to Xi Jinping's oath taking ceremony, nor is he invited here. He knows, and we have. See, India is not an expansionist power. India respects other countries. We keep telling the Pakistanis the same thing. The whole what India what has to look at the other way around. What has India done in the last 4 years? Through our shared deployments and posturing, we have restrained the Chinese. I would say that. You might think the Chinese are putting pressure on. I say no. We are restraining the Chinese. And look what is Pakistan doing. Pakistan is an internally imploding state, which is being, which during, I keep telling my Pakistani friends, do not follow a policy of mimicking India or catching up with India. You'll destroy yourself. The policy of equivalence is it is not feasible for you. So what are you trying to do? You have a 8 to 10% defense budget, creates all kinds of these assets, which from nuclear assets to military assets, while your population is dying. See, we in India, for whatever it is, our total GDP to related defense budget is under 2%, is 1.6, 1.7%. We are conscious of that. And that is why we are not so much in a muscular domain of our power, but what we are trying to say is we are trying to create an intrinsic military capacity capabilities, including missile forces, including MOV systems, to provide a credibility to our deterrence. And we are also at some level going through the strategy or trying to implement a strategy of an integrated deterrence, which includes the whole gamut of economies, trade, and other relationships. We are not concerned. We will handle our neighborhood. We are not in an antagonistic relation with them. They might be angry with us today on certain issues, but we can always, like they say, we will take care of our misunderstandings. But there are no strategic challenges from them. And as far as generally perception is that the Chinese is moving into this region, it is whole bunkum. Chinese cannot support any intra-theater deployment or movements from its mainland in Tibet into India and from any direction, be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, be it Myanmar, nothing. We can we we can contain all any of those actions if we want to do it, and we are developing capabilities and capacity to do it. Please do not overread and get carried away by the Chinese propaganda.
Yeah. Uh, Given the precedence of the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Gaza conflict being long and destructive, the next war initiated by China oblique allies may be similar in nature.
Uh, Short answer, unlikely. Like I try to say, it's going to remain limited because consequences of an all-out war between China and the Western alliance system or the alliance system is going to be too horrendous. Because if victory is not given through conventional means, then they'll start going nuclear posturing. Nuclear posturing has its own elements, own limitations. There's a whole new ball game. So, like I try to explain, the Chinese are going to follow a policy for next 10 years plus, a policy of what I call is posturing, brinkmanship through coercion, occupying islands, etc., etc. Fully convinced by the fact is that they are in no position to launch an all-out war to take out Taiwan. In any case, amphibious operations are very difficult. You can do all kinds of maneuvering through air and sea, but when you have to put feet on the ground, then the cookie starts to crumble. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look at the number of months it takes to take on a city. Just see Bakhmut, just see what happened over there. It's not. These things are all easy to talk about and get carried away. But reality of life is right. It's an attrition warfare, all on, all out. Technology is important, technology plays an important role. But sadly speaking, sir, in any such conflict, technology will be at par or only at 60-40 difference, 60 in favor of the attacker or whoever it is, and 40 on the other side. That will not provide you credible strategic advantage. We are living in a fool's paradise to think that technology can provide you overwhelming advantage. No, eventually you will have to fight. And fight for what? Occupation of Taiwan? Just see, go and see that line over there. I have done some wargaming with the Taiwanese. There's a line called 3.2 kilometer line on the beach, and all the entire assets of the Taiwan are deployed to ensure that the Chinese do not breach the 3.2 line. And every single assets which the Taiwan has or which will come in support of Taiwan will be deployed against it. And if the Chinese amphibious operations go awry, just see the kind of face the China will be left with. The Chinese will not take that chance easily until it's fully shown. And God knows when they're going to be shown. So Chinese are a great posturing power. It gives you a lot of Sun Tzus and all are being quoted. But the reality of life is the China is as constrained power like anybody else. Uh, And look at the United States of America. In the last so many years, where has this used power? It has used power against small time forces. They have never used power against people with equal amount of military capacity and capability. And that's why there is a surrogate or a proxy war going on in Ukraine, not a direct war. Please see that in from that perspective.
Last question, sir. Why aren't we activating our military diplomacy combo to form a sort of a Southeast Asian quad by uniting Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Philippines, and encircling China? He'll surely piss in his pants.
Small answer: 73% of the ASEANs believe their benefactor is China. They have an economic relationship. They got a back end supply chain relationships. And if you look at the architecture of ASEAN, sir, starting from the east, Vietnamese have what they call a three no policy. Three no policy is that they don't want to get into a conflict with China. Number two is Laos. You know what the situation was. Look at Cambodia. We talked about the Ream naval base and how they have increased their footprints into Cambodia. Then we have Thailand. Thailand is a quasi American alliance partner. It's as much of as a Chinese surrogate. Indonesia, the biggest power in the region, is strategically unaligned. Does not want to take any chances, and incidentally, Indonesia doesn't have much of a military. So Philippines is the only one which has broken ranks, which has gone the thing, and we will see more and more of these things happening with when Vietnam also becomes a much more dynamic way. But Vietnam has a problem; it has got a boundary issue. I mean, boundary with China. So so the question is not so easy. And what is the American influence in the region? Apart from economic and trade, which is also declining, not very much. And as far as India is concerned, sir, in the latest ISA study, which is taken out by the Singaporean think tank, 4% of the regional players, ASEAN players, look at India as a partner of consequence. 4%. That's the limit. So we have to enhance our capacities. We have to have capabilities. We have to have an economically more engaged policy with the region, and also upgrade our military capability. When you have a cruise missile of 2,500 kilometers or 1,800 kilometers, which can cover the entire of ASEAN, ASEAN will look at you. They say, yeah, he's the guy who will support me if the push comes to shove. Or Kalimantan, which is at the mouth of Malacca Strait, is captured. Salang is a new base which is coming up, but Salang is not a naval base, but it's an area from where at least we can put some kind of a. We have a satellite station in Indonesia. I hope you know. So basically, we keep the area under check, but these countries are very scared. They are small. They do not want to get antagonistic. And by and large, the most interesting facet, which I don't know whether you're aware or not, is the Southeast Asians have given more or less given up their South China policy uh, completely. They are not going to antagonize the Chinese
China.
or the nine dash lines. No, they are given up that completely. So that's a history. Please, they don't want to get involved in it. Common code of conduct? No. That they they will willing to discuss. They will discuss, have a bilateral arrangements, etc. But no ASEAN
No one will
articles at
take
all.
up arms with them.
No.
There's no doubt. Okay. Is China opening multi-fronts to finally get hold of some adversarial territory during Xi's regime to get a face saving? He's looking at the political angles in the last question, and after this, we'll close.
Short answer is no. I don't think the Chinese are those so stupid. What basically, as far as India is concerned, India is part of a larger problem. They want to. There is a perception that pressurize India, not allowed to become a move from a strategic partner to a more closer partner of the United States, and become, like I try to explain, the triangle. If the two elements of the triangle join hands in a more constructive manner and in a more strategic fashion, then that becomes a problem for the Chinese. Their entire sea lines of communications are exposed. We are also looking at them as a constraint power. So these are posturing tactics and trying to ensure that certain degree of yeah. I mean, China can occupy one or two islands in the Taiwan Strait and say we have captured some part of our territory, etc., etc. People will say accept it, yeah. But per se, any major action in either in the South China Sea against Philippines or against Taiwan State, I do not think is within the Chinese capabilities.
Fine. I think so. We've had a fascinating discussion on what China's capabilities are or what China's limitations are. And as we go along, we'll see that these things we have to focus more because more than getting into a war with China, we should know how to handle China uh, on these issues. So I've finished. If you have anything to say, fine. Otherwise,
I
we'll
want
call
to
it.
thank you for giving me this opportunity of blabbering myself, sir, but I
No,
apologize.
no. So I thought you made you brought in a lot of new dimension, and we'll take up this offer of yours to understand Pakistan better and why we need to understand Pakistan better. And which I said last time is Pakistan is a state which has always been defeated in all wars, but yet the army emerges victorious. How do you
Yes.
how do you handle this kind of a state which revels in defeat, which doesn't mind getting defeated? I mean, it's not defeat is no more a bad word in Pakistan militarily, right? And they'll still merrily go along, and he's our adversary, and he's almost our permanent adversary. So how do you handle them? I think we need to look at more avenues, and since you've spoken to them one on one, we'd like to hear their views, and we'll
Sure.
do that on the third week of this month once you return from USA. So
Thank
thanks
you,
a
sir.
lot,
Thank you, sir.
and
Thank you.
thanks a lot to everyone who's come on and put on a lot of questions. We'll meet tomorrow, and tomorrow we're going to discuss a very interesting topic. Did China interfere in our elections? Right,
Yes.
which they did, and if they had done, what have they achieved? That's something which is also interesting. I'm getting someone who's done a bit of research on this to talk to all of you. Thank you, sir. Good evening, sir, and Jai
Yeah,
Hind
thank
to
you very
everyone,
much.
and Jai Hind.
Thanks, Jay.